My name is Seth Callahan. I'm 33 years old. I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Seattle. I design the parts of buildings that nobody sees, the bones, the load-bearing elements, the invisible architecture that keeps everything standing. People walk into a finished building and notice the ceiling, or the light fixtures, or the view from the fourth floor window. Nobody notices what I did. That's how I know it's working. I tell you that because it's relevant. I've spent my career thinking about what holds things up, what bears weight quietly, without recognition, without anyone stopping to consider that without it, the whole thing comes down. I wasn't expecting to think about any of that on a Tuesday night in November, when I missed the last train from Bellingham to Seattle by 4 minutes. But that's where this starts. I'd been in Bellingham for a site visit. A commercial building project, early structural assessment, the kind of thing that should have taken 3 hours and took 6, because the existing plans had been drawn by someone who had approached accuracy as a suggestion rather than a requirement. I spent the afternoon in a half-finished building in November with a flashlight and a measuring tape, correcting other people's math, which is a significant portion of what I actually do for a living. I left later than planned, later than I should have. I knew the last train was at 9:42. I got to the station at 9:46. I stood on the platform and watched the lights disappear south. For a moment, I just stood there in the cold. The particular cold of a November platform at night, the kind that comes up through your shoes and settles in your back. The platform was empty except for a woman sitting on the far bench with a bag at her feet, looking at the same disappearing lights with the expression of someone who had arrived at the same conclusion I had. We'd both missed it. She was the first to speak. Without looking at me, still looking at the track, she said, "Please tell me you know something I don't about a bus." "There's a bus," I said, "but it left at 9:30. She closed her eyes briefly. "Of course it did," she said. I sat down on the bench at the other end, a reasonable distance, and pulled out my phone to find options. She did the same. We sat in parallel silence for a few minutes, two people doing the same problem separately, which in retrospect was exactly the kind of thing we'd both stop doing eventually. The options were a car service that quoted $240 to Seattle at this hour, the next morning's first train at 6:20, or a hotel. I looked at the car service number. I looked at my wallet's recent relationship with $240, I said, mostly to myself. "Car service is $240, she said from her end of the bench. "I saw that. I'm looking at hotels." I looked at hotels. Bellingham on a Tuesday night in November was not a high-demand market. There were options. Most of them were fine. One of them, the Aldercroft, was 3 blocks from the station and had a room available. 1 room. I saw it at the same moment she made a sound. Not a word. Just a small sound of someone arriving at information they weren't sure what to do with. I looked over. She was looking at her phone. She looked at me. "The Aldercroft," she said. "1 room," I said. "1 room," she said. We looked at each other for the first time properly. She was maybe 30. Brown hair, slightly damp at the ends from the November air. She was wearing a coat that was good quality but practical, the kind that chose warmth over appearance. Her eyes were dark and direct, and she was doing the same assessment I was. Stranger, platform. "Tuesday night, limited options," she said. "There are other hotels." I pulled up 2 more, both fully booked. I showed her the screen. She looked at it, then pulled up her own search and came to the same conclusion. She said, "How much is the room?" $9.85, I said. "Split it's $47.50, she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at me steadily. "I don't know you," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm Seth Callahan. I'm a structural engineer. I was here for a site visit and missed the train because the existing building plans were wrong in about 9 different ways." She looked at me. "That's a very specific alibi," she said. "It's not an alibi," I said. "It's just what happened." She studied me for another moment. The assessing kind. The kind that has nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with basic safety, calculus. Then she said, "Nadia Ose. I was here for a meeting with a client who rescheduled 4 times and then ran over by 2 hours." "That's also a very specific alibi," I said. It's not an alibi, she said. It's just what happened. Something in her expression moved. Not quite a smile, but the structural precursor to one. She said, "There's a sofa in the room photos." I pulled up the listing. There was indeed a sofa. Small, clearly an afterthought, positioned under the window with the energy of furniture that knew it wasn't the main event. "I'll take the sofa," I said. She looked at me. "You're taller than me," she said. "It's one night," I said. She looked at the track where the train had gone. Then she stood up, picked up her bag, and said, $47.50 each. We split breakfast if there is any. And we don't have to talk if we don't want to." "Agreed," I said. We walked to the Aldercroft. 3 blocks in the November cold, side by side, two strangers carrying their inconvenience, with the practical solidarity of people who have decided to solve a problem together rather than separately. The Aldercroft was the kind of hotel that had been better 30 years ago and knew it. The lobby had wood paneling and a front desk staffed by a man in his 60s who did not find two strangers checking in together at 10 at night particularly remarkable, which said something about either his years in the industry or the town of Bellingham on a Tuesday. The room was on the second floor. It was clean and adequately heated and smelled faintly of the pine cleaner that budget hotels use as a universal solution. 2 windows overlooked the street. 1 bed, which was large and impersonal. 1 sofa under the window, which was as small as the photographs had suggested. Nadia stood in the middle of the room and looked at the sofa. She looked at me. "That sofa is 4 feet long," she said. "I've slept in worse," I said. This was true. Field work involves some genuinely bad sleeping situations. "You're 6 feet tall," she said. "Roughly," I said. "Seth," she said. It was the first time she'd used my name. "The bed is a king. There's a physical dividing principle available here that doesn't require you to spend the night folded like a piece of paper." I looked at the bed. "That's a reasonable observation," I said. "I'm a contracts lawyer," she said. "Reasonable observations are what I do." She put her bag down. "We're adults. We're strangers who happen to be in the same practical situation. The bed is large enough that we will not interact with each other physically in any way, and we can both be awake at 6 for the first train." She said it with the matter-of-fact clarity of someone who had been making arguments her entire professional life and was used to them landing. Said, "Okay." She nodded once, settled. I took the side near the window. She took the side near the door. We arranged ourselves with the careful distance of 2 people who were being adults about something that could, in other circumstances, have been awkward. She got ready for bed in the bathroom. I sat on my side of the mattress and looked at structural assessments on my phone until she came out and I took my turn. When I came back, she was already on her side, facing away, the lamp on her side still on and a book open in front of her. I said, "You travel with a book." "I travel with 3, she said, not looking up. "I'm always convinced I'll have more time than I do." "How many did you read today?" "None," she said. "The client talked for 2 hours about his concept for the building and asked my opinion on none of it." "What was the concept?" She lowered the book slightly. "A mixed-use development with a central atrium that he described as, and I'm quoting, virtually European." I looked at the ceiling. "What does that mean?" I said. "I asked," she said. "He said you know arches." I laughed. It came out in the quiet room, louder than I expected. She looked over her shoulder at me, surprised. Then she laughed too, briefly, surprised kind. She went back to her book. I looked at the ceiling. After a minute she said, without looking up, "What were the 9 wrong things?" "Plans," I said. "In the building." "Yes," she said. "You said there were 9 ways they were wrong." I said, "Load calculations that assumed the wrong soil composition, beam placements that didn't account for the wind loads at that elevation, foundation specifications from a coastal project pasted into a different file without being adjusted." "They pasted specs from a different project?" she said. "It happens more than it should," I said. "People copy existing documents and forget they're working with assumptions that don't transfer." She was quiet for a moment. "That's also a contracts problem," she said. "Wrong assumptions carried forward from a previous context." "What do you do about it in contracts?" I said. "You go back to the original conditions," she said. Strip out the inherited assumptions. Start from what's actually true about this specific situation. I thought about that. That's what I do on site, I said. Ignore the plans. Measure what's actually there. She turned slightly in my direction. Not fully, just enough. Interesting, she said, meaning it. She went back to her book. I looked at the ceiling. Neither of us said anything for 10 minutes. Then she said, Seth. Yeah. Why structural engineering? I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because I wanted to do something that mattered without anyone knowing I'd done it, I said. If I do my job right, the building stands, and nobody has any reason to think about why. It's only visible when it goes wrong. Silence. That's either very humble or very lonely, she said. Probably both, I said. She didn't answer, but she turned a page. I fell asleep looking at the ceiling of a hotel room in Bellingham and thinking about load-bearing assumptions and the difference between structures perform and structures that hold. I woke at 5:45. The room was gray with early light. Cold came off the window in soft waves. The city outside was the particular quiet of a place not yet awake, the sound of one car on a wet street somewhere below. Nadia was already up. She was sitting on the sofa under the window, the small inadequate sofa, with her knees pulled up and her book open, and a cup of something from the room's coffee machine that she was holding with both hands. She was wearing the same jacket she'd had on the platform, pulled over what she'd slept in, and she was reading with the focused stillness of someone who had been awake long enough to settle into the morning. She didn't notice me for a moment. I watched her without intending to study her. She was absorbed, that was the word, completely present in what she was doing, unperformed, unaware of being observed. The window light came across her face at an angle, and she had her lower lip pressed between her teeth, slightly the way people do when reading something they're working through. Then she looked up. I said, "Good book." "Very," she said. "I've been awake since 5. I'd apologize for the light, but you were clearly already awake." "Just," I said. I sat up. "What is it?" "A history of contract law," she said. I looked at her. "For leisure," I said. "I find it genuinely interesting," she said. "The history of how people decided to formalize promises. What they thought needed writing down and what they assumed didn't need to be said." She looked at the page. "Most of the disasters in contract law come from the things people assumed everyone understood." "Inherited assumptions," I said. She looked at me, recognized her own words from the night before. "Exactly," she said. I got up, made the second cup from the machine, sat not on my side of the bed but on the other end of the sofa, because the sofa was where she was, and the morning had a quality that made the distance of the bed seem like the wrong choice. She made room without commenting on it. We sat with our coffee in the gray morning light, and she told me about the history of contract law, which sounds like the least compelling sentence I've ever written. But the way she talked about it made it into something else. She talked about it the way someone talks about a subject they love when they've stopped worrying about whether the other person will find it interesting, completely, with detail, with the occasional aside that revealed what she actually thought about it underneath the professional layer. I asked questions. She answered them, and then asked about the building. I told her about the soil composition issue, about what happens when you build on assumptions that belong to a site, a different set of conditions. We talked for an hour. I know it was an hour because I looked at the clock when we finally stopped, and it was 6:50, and the train was at 6:20. We looked at each other. "We missed it," I said. She looked at the clock, then out the window, then back at me. She didn't look devastated. Neither did I. "Next one's at 8:10, she said. "Yes," I said. "There's apparently a diner 2 blocks over," she said. "I looked it up last night. Breakfast was part of the agreement," I said. "It was," she said. She closed the book. The diner was called Heron's, and it had been there since 1974, according to the sign, and it looked every year of it in the best way. Booths with tape-repaired vinyl, a counter with actual stools, a menu on a laminated card that had not changed in any meaningful way since the Carter administration. We took a booth by the window. She ordered eggs and wheat toast and black coffee. I ordered the same. Outside the window, Bellingham was waking up. A gray, cool, ordinary Wednesday morning. Delivery trucks and dog walkers, and a man opening a hardware store across the street with the particular unhurried movement of someone who had been doing the same thing every morning for 30 years. She was looking at the street. I was looking at her. Looking at the street. She said, "I moved to Seattle 14 months ago." "From where?" I said. "Chicago," she said. "I was at a firm there for 5 years. A good firm. A good position. I was good at it." "But," I said. She turned her coffee cup. "Have you ever been very competent at something that fit you professionally, but not actually?" She said. "I thought about it honestly. Not in the same way," I said, "but I understand the shape of it. I was efficient in Chicago," she said. "Productive. Respected. I went home every evening, and the apartment was nice, and the neighborhood was nice, and I had friends I saw on weekends." She looked out the window, and I kept having this feeling. Not unhappiness exactly. More like I was reading from a script that had been written for someone very similar to me, but not quite me. "What did you do?" I said. "I took a lateral position at a smaller firm in Seattle," she said. "Less prestige, different kind of work. My mother thought I'd lost my mind. My colleagues thought I was making a mistake." "Were they wrong?" I said. She looked at me. "I'm better here," she said. "I work harder and earn less, and I'm more myself than I've been since I was 22. She said it with the certainty of someone who'd tested the conclusion from multiple angles. Sometimes the smaller thing is the right thing. Food arrived. We ate in the comfortable quiet of people who had graduated past needing to fill the silence. After a while, she said, "You mentioned last night that it's only visible when it goes wrong. Your work." "Yes," I said. "Does that bother you?" I looked at my coffee. "It used to," I said. "When I was younger, I wanted the thing I built to be seen. I wanted credit for the invisible part." I turned the cup. "But I've worked on enough buildings now that I understand the point isn't the credit. The point is the building standing. The point is people walking in every day without any reason to think about what's holding it up. That's what success looks like." She looked at me. "That's not a small thing to understand about yourself," she said. "I'm 33, I said. "I had time." She smiled. "The real version. I hadn't seen it fully until now. The previous ones had been partial, arrived carefully. This one was complete. Something in the morning shifted. Not dramatically. Just the way light shifts when a cloud moves. The same scene, more visible." I said, "Can I ask you something?" "You've been asking me things all morning," she said. "One more," I said. She nodded. "What made you decide the sofa conversation was worth having?" I said. "Last night. You could have let me take it. Most people would have let me take it." She looked at her plate. "Because it was an unnecessary thing," she said. "You were going to fold yourself onto a 4-foot sofa for no reason except that you'd decided it was the polite arrangement. And I've spent enough of my professional life watching people accept unnecessary discomfort because the alternative required saying something direct." She looked at me. "I find unnecessary discomfort very hard to watch." "Is that a contracts lawyer thing?" I said. "It's a me thing," she said. "The contracts law is probably why." I looked at her. "Nadia," I said. "Yeah. I'd like to have dinner with you," I said. "In Seattle, when we're not stranded in the same city by the same train schedule." She looked at me. The assessment again. Careful and full. "What kind of dinner?" she said. "The kind where we actually chose to be there," I said. "Not the kind where the options were limited." She was quiet for a moment. "No inherited assumptions," she said. "No inherited assumptions," I said. "Just what's actually true about this specific situation." She looked out the window at the ordinary Wednesday morning. Then back at me. "Saturday," she said. "I'll pick the place." "You pick the place," I said. She nodded once, settled, like a contract, entered into willingly, with the terms clearly stated. She picked a small Japanese restaurant on Capitol Hill that she'd been going to since she moved to Seattle. She knew the owner. She knew what to order. She brought me there like she was showing me something she trusted me with, which I understood was not a small thing. We talked for 4 hours. The second dinner was the same and lasted longer. By the fifth dinner, we'd stopped counting. She met my work colleagues at a firm event in January. My manager, a pragmatic man named Gerald, who had been in structural engineering for 30 years and had the particular directness of someone who'd stopped having time for unnecessary things, pulled me aside near the end of the evening and said, "She asks the right questions." "What do you mean?" I said. "She asked me what the hardest part of what you do is," he said. "Not the most impressive part, the hardest part." He looked across the room at Nadia, who was apparently explaining something to two of my colleagues using a bread roll as a visual aid. "Most people ask the impressive part." "What did you tell her?" I said. "The truth," he said, "that the hardest part is knowing that if you do it right, nothing ever happens. You spend your career preventing things nobody will ever know needed preventing." "What did she say?" I said. Gerald looked at me. She said that sounded like exactly the kind of work worth doing," he said. He walked away. I stood there for a moment. Then I crossed the room to where Nadia was finishing her structural analysis of the bread roll, and I stood beside her, and she glanced at me, and whatever she saw in my face made her wrap up the explanation and turn toward me fully. She said, "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Gerald likes you." "I know," she said. "I asked him good questions." "How did you know what the good questions were?" I said. She looked at me. "You told me," she said. "On the platform, you said you design the parts nobody sees, so I asked about the parts nobody sees." I looked at her. In the middle of a firm event in January with bad catering and too many people, I understood something that I'd been building toward without naming. I said, "Nadia." "Yeah, I've been thinking about the thing you said," in Bellingham. "About the script written for someone very similar to you, but not quite you." She waited. "I've been living a version of that," I said. Not unhappily, but quietly. A life that fit on paper and mostly fit in practice, but that I'd stopped examining because examining it required admitting it wasn't quite right. She was very still. "You're examining it now," she said. "Since November," I said. She looked at me with the full, careful attention that I'd come to understand was the way she gave her complete consideration to something she wanted to get right. "Seth," she said. "Yeah. I missed that train on purpose," she said. I stared at her. She kept her face completely neutral for 4 seconds. Then it broke. "I'm kidding," she said. "I genuinely missed it. I would never." "That was terrible," I said. "I know," she said. She was laughing. "Your face." "My face was completely reasonable," I said. "You went completely white," she said. She was still laughing. The real version, the one I'd been collecting from the first morning in the diner. I looked at her, laughing in a badly lit event space, with a firm full of engineers who thought in load calculations and a bread roll she'd used as a visual aid somewhere behind her. I said, "I love you." She stopped laughing, not abruptly. It just settled. She looked at me. "I know," she said, quietly. "I've known for a while." "And," I said. She looked at the room, then back at me. "I moved to Seattle because I wanted a life that fit me," she said, "not one that fit someone very similar to me." She looked at her hands. "For the first time in a long time, I think it does." "Because of the firm," I said. She looked up. "Because of the work," she said, "and because of a platform in November and a 4-foot sofa and an hour in gray morning light talking about inherited assumptions." She took a breath. "I love you too. I've been deciding whether to say it for about 6 weeks." "What decided it?" I said. "The bread roll explanation," she said. "I was using structural language to explain a legal concept to your colleagues, and I thought, who else would I do this for?" I looked at her. "Nobody," I said. "Nobody," she said. We got married the following October. Small. Her family from Chicago, mine from Portland. A few people from each of our work lives who'd earned the invitation. Her mother, who had thought moving to Seattle was a mistake, shook my hand at the reception and said, "She seems more herself with you." She said it like a fact she'd been sitting with and had finally decided to deliver. "I'm glad," I said. "She told me about the train," her mother said, "about the hotel." "It was a good hotel," I said. Her mother looked at me. "You took the sofa." "I offered the sofa," I said. "She overruled me." Her mother smiled. "That sounds right." In my vows, I said, "You told me that most disasters come from assumptions people carry forward without checking. I've been checking everything since November. Measuring what's actually there instead of what the plans say. And what's actually there is better than anything I would have designed," Nadia said. You build things that hold without anyone knowing why they hold. You've been doing that for me since a Tuesday night on a platform in Bellingham. I want you to know I see the structure. I've always seen it, her mother cried. Mine did too. Gerald from my firm raised his glass and said nothing, which from Gerald was the highest possible tribute. We still take the train to Bellingham once a year, not for work, just to go. Saturday morning up, Sunday afternoon back. We walk the 3 blocks to the Aldercroft and stand outside it, and then walk the 2 blocks to Heron's Diner and order eggs, and wheat toast and black coffee, and sit in the booth by the window. She brings a book, always 3. Never enough time. I look at the buildings on the street the way I always look at buildings, thinking about what's inside the walls, what's carrying the weight invisibly, what would only become visible if it failed. Last October, she looked up from her book and said, "What are you thinking about?" I said, "The hardware store across the street. The load distribution on that corner beam is doing something interesting." She looked at the hardware store. "You can see that from here?" she said. "If you know what to look at," I said. She looked at me. "I know what to look at," she said. She went back to her book. I drank my coffee, outside, the ordinary Wednesday morning of a city going about its life. People with somewhere to be and things to carry, and the invisible architecture of everything holding them up without their knowledge or gratitude, doing its job, the way good things do, quietly, completely, without needing to be seen.